and I have tried a few new technology things, so we'll see if that actually works. I've got a poll going in Zoom here later. Okay. Caregiver collaboration 97156. So we're going to start by going back to what the code is, what we actually do that we get paid for in this category. So family adaptive behavior treatment guidance administered by a physician or other qualified healthcare professional with or without the patient present face-to-face with guardians or caregivers for every 15 minutes. And the question is, what the heck is family adaptive behavior treatment guidance? Because I don't think anyone's ever gone to write a note or talk to a parent and say that we're going to do family adaptive behavior treatment guidance. So I think that's the first problem, is what the heck is that? They don't make it easy on us. And then this is the, sorry, all the faces on my slide. There we go. This is from ABAI supplemental guidance. This is the example that they give for everyone of what we're actually supposed to be doing when we build this code. Prior to the appointment, we review data, notes, and treatment protocols regarding the individuals. And for this example, they're using PECs. Before the session, gathers all materials required for the session. During the session, reviews the treatment protocol with parents. And for this example, it's PECs. Demonstrates those procedures with the individual while the parents observe, then has each parent in turn implement the procedures with the individual while the supervisor observes, provides feedback, and records data on the individual's performance. BCBA gives the parents a copy of the treatment protocol and data sheets with instructions for implementing the protocol during typical family routines. I'm sure this example has happened to someone somewhere. This absolutely picture perfect example, but this is probably not what parent training looks like for everyone for every session. But I do want to focus on different parts. Obviously, if you're demonstrating, if you're coaching the parent on implementing a procedure, that's clearly parent training. That's what we're looking for, but not every session looks like that. No. Okay, so, credit to Kate here. We're going to reframe this topic a little bit. And instead of calling it parent training, want to call it caregiver collaboration because it's not just training. There's much more to it than just saying like, oh, try doing this intervention and this is how we do it. And coaching and giving one-on-one feedback to a parent while they attempt to implement it. It's not just that. And training also implies one-way instruction. We're telling the parent what to do and they're following our directions. And that's not what we're looking for either. So I want you guys to think of 97156 as anytime a supervisor meets with a caregiver and provides the caregiver with a better understanding of our treatment plan, our goals, or our interventions. And then for documentation of that, we want to use the words reviewed, trained, modeled, coached, role played, demonstrated. I want to really focus on review because I think it's possible that we're doing some things that we think that might not cover the definition of review, to look back on, go over, examine. I'm sure there's a lot of times we're going over something, going over an intervention with a parent. We're like, does that actually count as 97156? If they have a better understanding of our treatment plan, our goals, our interventions, by going over, looking back on, going over the data, going over the client's progress, going over targets that are mastered, and you can say this now and this now and this now, that's all 97156. Be specific on what goal or intervention was covered. So you can say reviewed client progress on this goal, reviewed mastered targets with parents, reviewed updates to this intervention. you can put down things like parents stated they intend to implement the intervention, get it started this weekend. Want to reiterate the one tricky thing about 97156 is that it cannot be billed concurrently if the client is present. That's in the room. So if you are working with the parents with the client, then 97153 can't be billed at the same time because there's no opportunity for direct to be done.
I
But
have
if
a question about that.
what's that?
I have a question quick
Sure.
about that. So I'm thinking specifically of Rake because their house is super tiny.
Mhm.
Um, and like Stacy and Rake could be in one room and mom and I are in another room, but we're less than 15 feet away from each other. And
As,
there's really no way to avoid that.
as long as they're in another room.
Okay. Okay,
That's,
cool. Thank you.
there just has to be the opportunity to direct. If they're in the same, if they're
Okay.
in the same room as a parent, that and while you're doing parent training, there's really no opportunity for them to do direct.
Okay.
If
Okay.
they're separated, if they're in another room, then they can both be billed concurrently.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay. Do I have to? Okay, hold on. My poll button went away. Okay, so let's see if this actually works. All right, so 2 questions. Question 1 is how many hours per client per month of 97156 do you think we're doing as a company? So if you add up all the cases that we have, all the hours that were done, and divide it by all the clients, or like your caseload on average, if you have 5 clients, how many clients per month, or I'm sorry, how many 97156 hours per client per month do you think we're doing? So how many hours do you think every client is getting of 97156 per month? And then the second question is how many hours per client per month do you think we should be doing? So like in our treatment plans, we'll have 2 hours per month, or we'll have 4 hours per month. On the last page of the treatment plan is how much we're requesting from the insurance. How many hours per month per client do you think we're actually doing? And how many do you think we should be doing? I give a few more seconds for anyone that hasn't answered yet, and then we'll see. All right, anyone that wants to answer that hasn't yet. All right, let's see what we. Um. Okay. So we've. So our guess is for how many hours we think we're doing per client per month. We've got anywhere from 30 minutes to 4 hours. We've got some 1, some 2 to 3 hours, 1 to 2, 2 hours, 1 hour. It seems like we're guessing somewhere in the like 1 to 3 range is how many hours we're actually doing. And then back up. Okay, so our actual 97156 hours for the month of October, we did as a company 18.5 hours total for the entire month of October for every single clinician. 18.5 hours total were billed with 97156. And we have 29 total clients. So that averages out to 0.637 hours per client per month. 15 clients, that's more than half, had no 97156 hours billed at all. And then to put that in further perspective, we did 402.25 hours of protocol mod total for October, which averaged almost 14 hours per month. So you guys are going out there. It's not like we're not seeing our clients at all. You guys are going out there and getting plenty of protocol mod in, but we're not getting enough 97156 in. Slide. Okay, so I want to make a goal for us for how much 97156 we should be doing. And I want to go back to our poll. And our poll, we had 2 to 3, 3 to 5. Oh, wow. Some of these, you guys are more ambitious than I am. 4 to 6 hours per client per month. That's more than we're requesting mostly. I'd like to make a goal of like 2 hours per client per month. What do you guys feel about that? And I understand that there's some clients that, you know, we're just starting services. There's some clients that we're ending services and they don't need a ton of 97156. So this is why I want to look at not call like any single client or any single supervisor out. I want to look at this as like an organizational number of how much 97156 we're doing. So what do you guys think about making a goal of like 2 hours per month per client? So if we have 29 clients, we want to be hitting 58 hours per month of 97156.
I think that's doable.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too.
Would you be opposed to a range where whereas like some cases would do like 1.5 and some cases might do like 2.5 or something like that, whereas some cases might not require as much parent training, some would require more parent training in the moment, or depending on where they're at?
Yeah, I'm looking at that average. So I'm not looking at like individual, like I'm not saying we need to hit 2 hours for every case. It's for when we average all the hours and all the cases that we have together, how many hours per month per client are we averaging? So there's fine if we've got 1 or 2 that aren't getting any 97156 at all. We're looking at, or as an organization, we need to increase our 97156. So what number should we be looking at?
I like 2 also then.
Okay. So gonna make a treatment plan for us, and our goal is going to be averaging 2 hours per client per month. And we need an exit criteria. So let's try and average that for 3 consecutive months. And then when we do, we'll consider that goal to be mastered. And I will share, I don't have the numbers. I know we're almost to the end of November. I don't have the numbers for November yet. Takes a week or 2 to bill everything out, get that together. So as soon as I have the numbers for November, I'll share that. But we're only putting this in at the very end of November, and I'm taking your whole morning with this meeting. And Adriana, you've got like 6 meetings scheduled this morning. I'm not sure what time you got started. So I'm not expecting that number to dramatically increase in November, but in December and so on, we'll look for that to go up. All right, sorry. I've got like Zoom poll windows everywhere, and this is a lot to manage. Okay.
Okay, so if you want, I'll share my screen and I'll just share the actual PDF so that way I can zoom in. If it'll let me share.
Yeah, I have to stop sharing mine first. Yes, I know. Oh, there it is. The little red button was hidden.
Perfect. Can everybody see that? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, got it. All right, Chris, you want me to just...
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So when I met with Chris and Maria, we were kind of talking about the barriers that may exist for parent training, or caregiver collaboration, which is one of the number one points, I think, about misconceptions that impact the rate and effectiveness that we have for billing and utilizing this parent training 97156 code. So I just put together this simple infographic, and to be quite fair, I feel like each one of these 5 items could be an entire training in and of itself. But for purposes of this training not being 5 hours long, I'm going to kind of just stick with a couple different bulleted points for each number. So the first thing is impressions and misinterpretation of parent training. And Chris did a really great job of explaining the need for reframing. And I think it hits different when you walk into a parent's house and say, hey, I need to schedule an hour of parent training with you. Let me know what time works best for you. Little intimidating, like, hey, I don't know if I need trained how to be a parent, right? Versus, hey, I've been working on this treatment plan goal and I would love to collaborate with you on a couple different options that I'm considering. Those are received they're very different from the parent's perspective. And so I think that there's this misinterpretation of what parent training is. At no fault of our own, it might have just been part of your upbringing, SBCBA, your supervision, maybe what's in the literature. But nowadays, I think we can be a little bit more empathetic with our parents and make sure that we're sharing the different purposes of this billable code that insurance finds valuable, and how we interpret what those look like. So number one, impressions and misinterpretations of parent training, I think drastically impact the number of billable hours that we have per month per client. Any questions on that? Anybody feel that? I know I have some parents in the room, so if you guys want to just give me a thumbs up that might hit a little different, that would be awesome. Cool. The next one is making connections and building rapport with caregivers. So this one is super important. We are there all the time, especially in the in-home setting. I think you have a lot more opportunity to interact with caregivers. And so it's super important that if you want to have routine caregiver collaboration meetings, that you build rapport with caregivers. So that way, when you sit down to have difficult conversations with them, which do happen during caregiver collaboration meetings, you've already built that rapport. You've already made connections with them. So you can have conversations like, hey, unfortunately, due to like some things going on, we're not reaching our utilization numbers. What can I do to support you and your family to get those numbers, right? So having those hard conversations are a little bit easier if you have already made a connection and started building rapport with caregivers. And again, like bringing this back to the purpose of this conversation, this is one of the number one in my mind reasons why we don't meet with parents, because we have a hard time having those difficult conversations. And then when you ask a caregiver to meet for quote unquote parent training, they're like, great, what is this? What am I doing wrong now? Right. So it's a really uncomfortable conversation for them that they probably don't look forward to. You might see some escape avoidance behavior. However, flip side, if you already have made a connection with them, you've already started building rapport, it's not as intimidating when your BCBA says, hey, I need to schedule a 1-hour meeting with you. Can you meet next Wednesday at 4, right? So number 2, making connections and building rapport with caregivers. And then number 3 is the content of parent training sessions. So when you think about, if you just like take a second to think about all of the different topics that you've covered in parent training, my hope is that you have this like long list of things that you've talked to parents about. In a previous position, I was a traveling BCBA, so I covered maternity caseloads or any type of like medical leave caseloads. And I covered a case at one point where she had one parent training a month and she had a caseload of 11 kids. So that told me that she wasn't meeting with any of her parents except for one. And so I asked her before she went on leave, like what she was doing within those parent meetings. And the only thing she was doing was reviewing progress reports. So she was just like going through and looking at graphs and seeing what the graph looked like compared to the last time that they met with a parent. So while that's super important, we can definitely review progress. It's not the only thing that we can do within these parent training sessions and within these 97156 billable opportunities. There is an array of conversations that we can talk about, things we can do with parents, things we can model, things we can talk to them about. And so it's super important that as clinicians, we recognize what fits under this family adaptive behavior treatment session, or whatever the long list is called. And we like make a list of those things and start checking them off when we're in our parent training sessions. So number 3, the content of parent training sessions. Chris, I don't know if maybe one day we can send them out like a list, or we can give them different ideas, different things to think about. But for the purposes of this, just kind of talking about missed opportunities, the content of parent training sessions is one of them. And then number 4, how much time do you actually think you're spending communicating with caregivers? Everybody in this room probably has 15-minute conversations before or after a session. They probably have phone calls with a parent. Maybe they are sitting in on a session with an RBT providing protocol mods, and the parent pulls them aside and asks questions. So we actually do spend quite a bit of time communicating with caregivers. If we look at the numbers that Chris just showed us, and those numbers were rightfully like pretty low, which is why we have a goal of 2 hours per month per client. If you look at those numbers, I know, you've communicated with your parents way more than what those numbers are. So number 4 is just really recognizing, hey, we can bill for this. This is a billable code opportunity, even if it is for 15 minutes. And so just recognizing that the time spent communicating with caregivers, depending on what the topic is and depending on, how it's administered, most of those opportunities, we should take advantage of billing for those, because we are actually providing guidance to our caregivers during those times. And then that leads me to the last one, which is the missed opportunities for billing. So as I had mentioned before, even if you do have a 15-minute conversation with a parent, you should think about if that's a billable opportunity or not. And I think at the end of this training, you'll have a better understanding of what that 97156 code, you can use for it. And then here, I also want to note too, if you have just met a parent and you say, okay, I'm going to start scheduling 1 hour per month sessions with you. That parent may be like, oh, I don't know if I'll have time to, do a parent training once, 1 hour per week or 1 hour per month, whatever you decide. So start small. Think about just having a 5-minute conversation with them on a routine basis. I think I've used this example with Bonnie before, but if you were to tell me, hey, in order to improve your health, you have to work out for 1 hour per week, I'd be like, okay, sure, I'll have time for that. But if you were to say, hey, I need you to do this 5-minute exercise 1 hour per week, and this will help with your flexibility or whatever, I'd be like, yeah, 5 minutes, I'm sure I could do that. Same thing with parents. If you start small and you shape their behavior, where you start with 5 minutes and then you increase to 10, you increase to 15, you'll have more opportunities for billable units once you get to that 15-minute mark. But also just like starting small, understanding a parent has a lot going on outside of just the ABA services that the child is receiving, and kind of meeting them where they're at, the same way we would meet a client where they're at. We wouldn't expect a client who can't sit at the table for 30 seconds to sit at a table for 15 minutes and complete 3 different non-preferred activities. We would start small. We would start with one. We would start with a couple, 30 seconds, whatever it is, wherever they're at. So in order to reach those opportunities for billing, start small, meet the caregiver where they're at, and then continue to increase the expectation as you build rapport and as you build kind of like the understanding of what caregiver collaboration could actually look like. Okay.
Valuable for them too. So
yes, absolutely.
it shouldn't be something that they want to avoid. So they're like, I'll squeeze you in 15 minutes in 2 weeks.
Yeah. All right, back over to you, Chris.
All right, thanks. Want to dig into a couple of those topics a little bit more in a minute. Maria or Erica, do you guys have any comments to expand on any of that, or different direction?
I do, but Maria, do you have anything you want to go first?
No, I don't have anything to add right now. Go ahead.
Okay. I just don't want to jump in right in front of you. So as you were talking, Kate, I was thinking about one of the biggest challenges that I have been facing recently, which is learning how to kind of use what we have, our science, in the world of marketing. And the world of marketing is very similar to what we do, right? Like it's this idea of you don't want to be a salesman, you want to be a connector. So I was just kind of thinking of that when you were talking about your family, is like the goal is not to try to talk them into doing something they see no value in. The goal is to craft the message in a way that they see the value and then they want to do it. And Chris, I think you were kind of alluding to that. So maybe look at it. Like, I love your idea of shaping. And I think you're going to have those parents where like, that's what you do because, you know, you're not really getting to the point where you found the right messaging to get them fully on board. So you're going to go back a step and then you're going to build from there. But I would challenge you to say, let me take this on as a challenge from the perspective of how do I meet this parent where they are? And how do I arrange my messaging so that I can take advantage of and or like elicit natural MOs for that parent, right? And it's going to be different for every single family, but that would be something I would say. And then the last point that I have is I'm a behavior analyst too. So we as behavior analysts, I think we have this tendency, and I don't think we do it consciously or intentionally. I think it comes from the standpoint of trying to be honest. But we have this tendency to strip the human out of things because we are taking everything that's human and we're putting it in this mental health bucket, and then we're labeling it as we don't have that expertise. And so we're not qualified. That is so not true. Going back to kind of what Chris said, where the goal is that the parents come away with a better understanding. What happens is by us stripping out the human, we are fully decreasing the effectiveness of whatever it is we're trying to do. We're not able to connect as effectively. We're not able to get buy-in as effectively. So, you know, playing mental health counselor, I wouldn't call it that though. Honestly, I would call it like better communication skills, better listening skills, better interaction, all those things. By doing that, you're increasing your effectiveness. And like Chris said, then what does that do? It meets our goal, which is parents come away with a better understanding of what we're doing and or more capable of implementing. And there might be a barrier might be that, you know, they need to vent about something because it's like blocking in their brain. They can't go to the next step until they get through this process. And that's something maybe you sit there with them and you know, as a communicator, how would you handle that? So those are my 2 points.
Yeah, I think a big barrier for us is we go to grad school and we're like, we want to be behavior analysts, and we look at data and we're data people and we're science and we learn the science of behavior, and we're scientists, and we try to be like as part of a science as we can for people, and then they throw us in with people and we've got to interact with them and we've got to build relationships with them, and that's not the world that we've been trained for or that we like living in, and it's out of our comfort zone, and it's just part of the job. So I really want to work on some tips and skills to help building those relationships as part of this as well. So I want to kick it back. Does anyone have any comments from any of that?
So as a mom who has multiple professionals in and out of my house almost on a daily basis for my daughters, and I'm guilty of it too, but like catching me for 15 minutes at a time when I have 4 kids under the age of 7 in my house is going to be a whole lot easier for me, especially mentally, than if they come to me and say, hey, I need you to sit down for an hour, because sitting down for an hour in my house is not going to happen. I mean, Jess can attest to it. She's been to my house to have a meeting. She can attest to the chaos that is my house. But if we're standing over a cup of coffee for 15 minutes in the kitchen where I can watch the others, you know, do what they do, it's going to be a whole lot easier. And it's a lot less overwhelming for me as a parent than hearing I've got to figure out what to do with my younger 2 keep an eye on the therapy that's happening and find an hour to sit down amongst everything else I need to do.
Yeah, and if you do have time to meet with someone and they're like, oh, you should try doing this weekend. And then they come back the next week and they're like, how'd it go? And you're like, I didn't have a chance to do it.
Yeah.
Did they like throw
And
their arms at you?
right, exactly. And as a parent, like I carry a lot of guilt when I don't get those things done because I know they are to help my daughters do better and be better. But honestly, in the chaos of raising 5 kids, some days it just doesn't happen. So getting that grace from those professionals, you know, and giving that grace is really helpful in that relationship.
One thing that I love, I mean, I've been bragging about ARLE's parents since we brought them on last, like in February, but his mom actually kind of going back to what Kate was saying about calling it parent training, his mom flat out was like, no, I don't like that. Like, I don't need to be trained. Let's call it parent teaching. And I was like, I like that. Let's go with that. So now like anytime we refer to him, like, hey, do you have time to do like a parent teaching session this afternoon? And we've built a rapport in a sense that like now our sessions are pretty much them telling me what they've done and me giving them reinforcement for it. I mean, granted, we're discharging in a month, so it's not, we don't really have too much left to do with them, but I really like that she calls it that because it's a very teachable moment for both of us. Um, so that's always a good way to spin it too.
Okay, and that leads into the next thing that I want to do is just kind of go around the room, and I'd like everyone to share a barrier that they've experienced doing parent training and a success that you've experienced. So Bonnie, you just shared a success, something that's going well. We can start with you and share a barrier that you've had, and then we'll just go around the room and do that with everyone.
I'm living in a sea of barriers with 2 of my families right now. Kate and I were actually talking about this the other day. So for Capo's family, mom and dad are both like super busy, get it. But mom and dad have both expressed to Betty that they think we're doing a great job. They love it, but they want to see us implementing more discipline. So I'm actually going over there today and I'm going to talk to mom and see if I can't get their definition of discipline, see what it is exactly that they think should be done, and then talk to them about how we work with behavior change. So I have like a little like autism helper parent training thing that Kate had sent me a while ago that basically breaks down ABA into very simple, understandable phrasing for parents, and talk to them about how we start with like reinforcement first. And if that doesn't work, then and only then, like, would we go into like punishment stuff? But so that's been kind of a barrier. And I think I was talking to Kate, dad is Boston Irish Catholic. So there's some like cultural learning history there. So I have a feeling he's going to lean heavily into the discipline area. But I think just kind of talking to them about that will make it better. And then with Rake, I've made like a lot of really good headway with mom in the last like week or so. Like her attendance has already gotten better since we had a conversation. But now my biggest thing with them is encouraging mom, for lack of better words, to have a backbone with dad's family. On Thanksgiving, all of her cousins came downstairs and like pushed her and were essentially bullying her right in front of her parents. And mom was sitting there trying to get the cousins' parents to do something. They wouldn't do anything. And mom told me that dad stood up for Rake for the first time in her life on Thursday, and she's 4.5. So they don't really do much to help prevent the negative things that are happening to her from other family members. So I think my biggest barrier right now is helping mom kind of work through her own anxiety about stepping in and helping her help herself through those, or helping Rake work through those situations.
I want to touch on the first one where you said
Yeah.
the parent wants more discipline.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I like how you went straight to like, well, the ethics codes say this, and that's the ethics codes say this because all the research says this and all the data says this, and that's a great way to go. I also, when someone says they want more discipline, they probably want a result of some kind.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
way they want to reach that is, or the way that they conceptualize reaching it is discipline. So we have motivation of some kind on the parents' part there. So
Yes.
it's how do we dig into that motivation that they have, that result that they want,
Yeah.
and work with them to get that result in an ethical way.
Yeah. And I think for them, it's just not like, and I was talking to Kate about this, it's like when I did intake, dad told me almost verbatim that they've dipped their toes into like every kind of therapy possible. And they put everything on pause to do this, which I get it. But I'm wondering if there's just like a lack of commitment in some respect because they've kind of jumped from therapy to therapy without really giving anything the opportunity to really stick and have an effect. Um, so I'm gonna talk to them today and see if there's anything else like anything more that I can be doing to help support them with it because he has tantrums and he has behaviors, but it's nothing outside of the realm that's unmanageable. Like he's 3 and he just gets really upset when he doesn't get his way. So
And
I
So
think it's also like mom and dad are like, oh, he's tired, he needs to take a nap. And it's like, no, he's not tired. You're consistently denying him access to the things that he wants without giving him any leeway.
So Bonnie, coming from a very strong Irish Catholic Chicago background, and being raised in that,
Yeah.
Stacey, um, and I distinctly remember growing up and being the mentality being children are to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
So like I remember my younger brother having a tantrum and it blowing everybody's minds. And the other part of it is any sort of neurodiversity in a strong Irish Catholic family is flat out denied. Like it is not discussed. My anxiety, my ADHD growing up were not discussed. It was not handled. It is you are seen and you're not heard. So you're probably dealing with some of that too.
Oh, for sure. 1000%.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I can kind of empathize on that end.
Yeah.
And for my younger brother, the way it really clicked for my mom was seeing those results.
Yeah.
And she's
And they're
also
starting to like when I did his assessment, he was like 99% non-vocal. He wasn't really vocalizing much at all. And now like Betty can't get him to stop talking. He's vocalizing constantly. He is like, it's incredible. And we're not even up to his full 40 hours a week yet because we're still fading hours in. And he just will not stop talking. And it's amazing. And we're using like red and green cards to show him because he was escaping a lot to go see mom during sessions. So we have this red and green card where we show him like, oh, mom's working, she's not available. And the second we introduced that, he was like, oh, okay. And turned around and went right back to playing with Betty. And so like he's a very smart kid who just hasn't been given the opportunity to really like learn and thrive.
ABA Visualized has some really great behavior intervention plan visuals that might be helpful too.
Okay. I got my copy yesterday from Amazon. So
One thing Bonnie and I have talked about too with this case is, well, dad's obviously very motivated, similar to what Erica said when just a couple minutes ago, speaking to the parents' MO, dad's very motivated. And if we put on our behavior analytic hat, even if we look at experimental analysis, we know punishment does work. So there's probably been past times where discipline punishment has worked for dad. And so he would like to see us incorporate a little bit more. And then so Bonnie and I first talked about that, like, yes, we recognize this, but how can we bring the human components into it? And then how can we also meet dad where he's at, where he is very motivated to understand something, and their version of discipline might look different than how we program. And so we can just identify what dad means by discipline and what his expectations are before designing a protocol that includes what we envision as punishment and discipline. It may look a little different. So language is super important when you're thinking about caregiver collaboration. What does he mean by discipline? And so Bonnie's going to go in there and figure it out first before we make assumptions. I mean, we probably know what dad means, but before we make assumptions about, what his expectations are that we add to programming.
Okay, thanks everyone. Can we hear from someone else running cases, what your a barrier and a success that you're having with caregiver collaboration?
I think when I first started as a BCBA, I think part of my biggest barrier was feeling some imposter syndrome because I'm not a parent yet, and just kind of learning to have that human aspect of like meeting the parents where they're at, because like after working a full day, I'm not coming home to a house full of kids where I'm having to implement all these interventions and all these things. I'm for right now, for the next like 7.5 months, but so just kind of empathizing with the parents on that. And something that I've incorporated, not like necessarily like very structured act thing, but I kind of will meet with parents and be like, hey, what are your most important values to you? So, or like, what do you need from me that, like, can I give you something that, hey, let's try this like 5 minutes a day to help like increase things. So it's not like, okay, the minute you get home, you're going to be doing A, B, and C for the next like 3 hours. You're like, you got to get home, you got to, decompress from your day, got to get dinner on the table and all of those things. So just really trying to meet parents where they're at. And one of the successes on Bonnie and I's shared case. So this week I met with mom to review his reassessment, and she's starting to pick up things on her own now. So she was just like, I realized I'm giving in to his tantrums. And I was like, oh, talk to me about that. Like, what is that looking like for you? And she's like, oh, he'll say he wants something, and I tell him no because he's not able to have it in that moment. And she's like, he will like scream and cry and kick, and then I just end up giving it to him. And I go, okay. I was like, sometimes that happens. I was like, you're coming home from a full day of work, right? Like, I'm like, we're human. That's okay. So just kind of like giving her those strategies. So then I was able to talk to her of like, hey, let's try this. Let's try something that's not really preferred to deny access to. So maybe something that like he kind of likes playing with. And when he accepts, that denied access, be like, hey, I love that you said, okay, let's go ahead and let's go play with this now. So starting with something like really low level, and then being able to like move up from there. And she was like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. So like, she's already like starting to pick up on those things just from like us being able to like talk with her and just be like, hey, this is what we're seeing. This is happening with us as well. And I think that helps make that connection. So mom doesn't feel like, oh, it's only me that he's doing these things with. We're like, oh no, we're seeing these things too. Let's try, all of us, like starting on a lower level and then building that up. So that's been a good success this week.
Yeah, good points. And anybody who doesn't have kids, I'm sure we've all been there in that situation where like one of your first like 97151 sessions, they're like, oh, do you have kids? Tell me about your kids. Because you're asking so many questions about their kids. and you're like, oh, I don't have any yet. And then they just give you like a look that like, okay, I'm just like, that just took me down a notch in their eyes. And now we've got more that we have to cover here.
Jen, I also like the language that you used with mom of like, tell me more, and hey, that's going to happen. And I think that's realistic to parents of like, if you're giving them an intervention, hey, look, like not everything's going to be perfect. You're going to have crazy nights. You're going to have crazy days where like you're going to give into things. But also like having that be the majority, like be the lesser of times. I think that was really good that you empathized with mom and like kind of dug in a little deeper of like, well, what do you mean? Like, what are you seeing? What is her view of things? So I think that was really good to connect with mom on that point too.
And the other thing I like to tell parents too, so I'm like, listen, like I'm going to give you some suggestions, some interventions. And I was like, and sometimes these things might not work best for your family. And I was like, and if they're not, I was like, please tell me, I will, like we can change them. I typically try to tell parents like, hey, if we can try to do this like 50% of the time over the next month, let's like let's kind of like check in about how that's going. Are you guys feeling overwhelmed? Okay, then let's like bring it back a little bit. So where it's not like you have to do this 100% of the time every time. Like none of us do that, even as like with anything that we're doing, whether or not we have kids or not. So just like really just like meeting them like in the middle and being like, okay, let's try it for the next week. Let's do this like half the time. And let's see, like, were we seeing an increase in the behavior that we want to see, or are things still kind of staying the same? And then we can kind of go from there.
Great, thanks. All right, who'd like to go next?
So I think my biggest barrier is just not realizing those little 15-minute moments do count towards billing for parent training. So that came back to the forefront for me. Our biggest win, Jess and I share JOPE, and we've been doing the balance program out of Greg Hanley's SBT work with him. And mom and dad are reporting that it has improved their lives so much. And he's able to tolerate denials better, like when they're out in the community or the schedule changes. And we kind of had a similar situation, Jen, where like mom had set this expectation for herself that she was going to do it hours and hours a day, and we had to kind of dial her back and be like, no, 10 minutes a day is fine, because she was finding she couldn't do it and she felt really guilty that she wasn't getting it in. But she was saying like he gives up the remote, which has been a huge sticking point for him, with zero problems now. Or if his siblings are watching TV and she says, no, you can't have a turn with it, they're watching, he deals with that so much better now. So we've seen a lot of success with the balance program for parents.
Great, thanks. Good points.
I'll go next. I think this is, I think the best way to explain it is like some of my kiddos are having school hours and school hours only. And so I think sometimes the scheduling with parents can be difficult, because when you're at school, when their kids at school all day, they're working, and then they don't want to do anything in the evenings because the kid gets home at 4, they eat dinner, they do all the things and whatever and whatnot. And I feel like that is like kind of one of the biggest barriers for myself, is like that kind of scheduling aspect. Maybe not even on my end, but like if parents are really busy or they're just like, I don't have time for that. I know you guys were suggesting like 15-minute increments or whatever, but it's like, if I'm not at the home, like naturally doing protocol mod because the child doesn't get home hours or whatever, like that's kind of, I feel like the issue for my like specific barrier.
Adriana, for that, I have 2 parents that one set are also teachers. So we do Zoom in the evenings for parent training. And then the other parent, she utilizes her lunch break like once or twice a month to meet with me to get that done, because he only has school hours.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. I would say for a win, I don't have like a specific instance, but I just had a parent training last week with LIGU's mom, and it went super well. I think it was like, she was all about it, like, and I loved it. She was like all for like having a conversation and discussing things, and then also like being able to like show her with her kid that day the RBT did not have session, and so I was able to go into the home without the RBT being there and actually like model for mom and show mom how to do things. And I think that she really liked that she was able to see that happen in person, kind of, and me being there with the client as well when the RBT was not present. And I got a report from the RBT later on saying that she was trying really well. So we were talking about like not asking him questions and just saying, hey, it's my turn, we're going to do this, because based on the child, that's what needs to happen. And so she's like, it's been working. He's accepted me like playing with him or doing it with him or having a turn. And so she was able to see that like direct outcome. And I think that was beneficial for her.
Okay. Yeah, great. I do want to make the point that like our program is kind of unique, and we do comprehensive intensive services, and parent caregiver collaboration is an important part of that. So it's not like I want to dig into it a little bit more, but that is a tool that we have that like it shouldn't be optional for parents. Like it shouldn't be just something that they're like, okay, we're good, we don't need it. And there's a lot more that's going on with that we can dig into. Like it's a lot, like I'm not expecting you guys to go out and just say, well, this isn't optional, because that's not what this meeting is about at all. But that is it is an expectation that they participate when requested. Okay, great. Who'd like to go next?
I can go next. And I also wanted to start with a question too that I had that I was just thinking of.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of times that I could have billed as protocol, or not protocol mod, as parent training or parent collaboration. And I go out and it's more unexpected and not as planned. I'll go out and then I'll end up sitting there with the parents and then we're chatting and they want to know things about how things are going with the client, or review things too, or what they should do on their end. And it happens more unexpected. So it's not planned. So I'm already doing it as protocol mod. And the client's there, we're in the same room too. So it in a way should be protocol mod. But I find that just happens a lot where it's unexpected, where I could have billed it as parent training. But so that was just my question of, at that point, just continuing with protocol mod, or utilizing that opportunity of like, oh, I can do this as parent training, maybe separate the client to a different room then, or just saw that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there is some overlap. Like, it's not, the codes aren't exactly black and white between each other. Like, when they made these codes, they looked at like, what are we billing for now? What is it that we actually like do? And then they tried to put it in certain categories. So there are definitely some times where you intend to go out and do protocol mod, and then you're like, did I just do parent training instead? And then you've got to like think about like, okay, how much time did I spend doing this? How much time did I spend doing that? Was the client here? Was the client not here? So that definitely does happen, where there's some times where you're like, and if the client's in the same room and your tech is there, then it has to be protocol mod. But I've had a lot of situations where we've got a preschooler and we're doing home sessions, and the play area is like downstairs, and I walk in and the parents got some questions, and I end up not even seeing the tech of the client for like the next hour because we're going over questions that the parent has, and that would definitely qualify for caregiver collaboration.
Okay, so you would just do that hour as that, and then when you go down and see the client, then you just do that as a separate,
Yep.
session note and protocol mod. Okay.
Yep.
That makes sense then. Okay.
And if you're in the same room, it can be easy enough to be like, hey, do you want to like go in the kitchen and chat more about this? Or if the client is movable, like if it's easier for you guys to move or the client to move, you can direct the tech of like, hey, can you like go take them over there to play or whatever? I know a lot of our families don't live in a lot of separated living spaces. There are like rooms and stuff. So as long as, like Chris was saying, you're separated and in different rooms, like, and you're mainly talking to the parent and you're not doing protocol modification, just having that separation. So, but yeah, like if you find that the parent's like, oh, you can kind of, and I think with most families, you can anticipate which families are going to do that to you. I know I have like a history of like, I know exactly what family does that to me. So you can kind of anticipate that of like, oh, they're probably going to have questions. Maybe I should set aside the first half an hour to meet with them anyways, and kind of maybe anticipate that as time goes on too.
Definitely, that makes sense.
And there's other times similar as well, where the parent isn't initiating it, but I've blocked out a set of time to go out to this house to do protocol mod and parent training, and made the parent aware that like, hey, next time I come out, we're going to be, I want to go over a couple of things with you. And then when you show up to session, you're like, hey, I'm planning to be here until 2:00. There's a couple of things I want to go over with you. You let me know during this time when it works best for you, because you're in their home, you're a guest, and they've got other things going on. So just give them the expectation that like, hey, at some point during this afternoon, it'd be great if we could just meet, touch base on a couple of things.
Definitely. Okay. Thank you. That clears that up. So I would say then for a barrier, same family that I'm thinking of right now, NAOD, just a cultural barrier. I wouldn't say it's anything of significance really, but just when I've realized over time, I might explain something or just talk about some topic with NAOD. And there's just a miscommunication a little bit. I think just a lack of understanding how I might be saying it. So it might not even necessarily be on their end. It could be also how I might be saying something to where I think just that cultural barrier, barrier. I say something and then I have to kind of reword it maybe a couple times for them to understand it then eventually. And I can now see when it clicks or they understand what I'm saying. So I think it's honestly probably on my end too, on both ends, just a little bit of some miscommunication at times. For small things, that's just like, oh, I realize that they might not have understood how I said that or how I stated that. But I mean, what's good though is that we eventually get on the same page. So that's always good. We always figure out a way that we both understand each other. And then I'd say success, same family. They're very interested in ABA, and I'd even say that the terminology a little bit, especially dad, really interested in reinforcement, understanding what it is. And it seems like he's might have done some research himself too, which is it's pretty fun to see. Or just to talk about. So that's really for me to just use the terminology and the jargon a little bit. He finds it interesting, which I don't think we always come into contact with. So that reinforces my behavior a little bit.
Yeah, it's great when you've got a parent that like just wants to know. They're like, I'm on board. I just want to learn more. I want to know how to do this myself. And then,
I can go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think like one barrier, but I've sort of learned how to get around it in a way, is like when parents are on different pages, where you have one parent that is like all in, and then you have the other parent that's like, I don't know about this. And so then it's like trying to change what you're doing for one parent rather than the other to try to get the buy-in from the other parent, sort of figuring out why they're not all in kind of thing. And then hit the ground running with the parent that is all in, and then having that parent try to help the other parent kind of thing. Because I see that a lot, where it's one of those parents is like, yes, I'm here for this. And the other one's like, I don't know about that. So like that's a barrier that I've seen pop up with a few of my families. And then a win that we've recently had, Adriana and I, AIKH went to Disney World over Thanksgiving break, and we got a text from parents yesterday that like everything just went absolutely amazing, because she was having a lot of like behaviors when it was in a noisy setting. So we helped, like we did parent trainings to like help with those scenarios and that kind of thing. And they sent us a text at like 6:30 yesterday morning, just like overexcited, just so happy that she did so amazing. So it like made all of me, Adriana, and Harmony tear up a little bit. Because that was one of the families that the parents weren't on the same page. So then like seeing that all come together was just fantastic.
And I like how you worked with them on what was important for them so that they could be successful there.
Yep.
Jessica, can I pick on you?
Yeah, sure. So I think actually similar to what Caitlin said, there is a family that we kind of see the differences between mom and dad and their approaches to things. So that's a little bit of a barrier. But also with what Kayla said, I had a very similar question. So that clarification was definitely really helpful. There's definitely a lot of times where I go out for protocol mod and, 15, 30 minutes, kind of going over concerns, questions, just kind of updates with parents. So knowing the difference and splitting up the time if, again, like the client isn't in the room. I'm trying to think. I think also another thing that was helpful is just kind of shaping up that time. So going forward with families that it has been hard to kind of schedule some time with, just doing, 5-10 minute check-ins and then building upon that.
Okay, thanks. All right, so that took a little longer than I thought, and I have so much more plans, but we did hit on some good points. So what I want to do is I think we're going to cut this part off here, and we're gonna meet again and do part 2 on the first Wednesday of January, which is gonna be January 3rd. January 3rd at 8:30. And we're gonna start by reviewing some general tips and suggestions and going over the barriers that you guys presented here, and some tips and techniques. Kind of like reviewing if anyone was in that Scott Herbst training that we did a couple years ago. Like there was a lot of good stuff that was in that I want to kind of review, and some stuff related to that on how to build relationships. So try and get in some more caregiver collaboration time this month, and next month bring your challenges and your successes, and we'll continue to build off of that. Does anybody, Kate, Erica, Maria, Caitlin, anybody have any anything to build on from anything that came up there?
Not specifically, but I think, would it be helpful for you guys, for Chris and I, to make something for you of like sooner than later, of examples of how to bill and maybe to document? I know we use some words and stuff, but maybe give some more specific examples of that, of what a non-traditional parent training session might look like. Would that be helpful in the meantime?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know like some sessions you're like, you have a goal to cover this and this, and the parents just like, I don't like this and I don't like that, and I'm not comfortable with this. And then you spend an hour just like going over things that you thought you'd already covered, and you're like, how the heck do I bill for this? But if they leave with a better understanding of the treatment plan, you would just document, you reviewed this intervention with the parent. You discuss this barrier that the parent had implementing this intervention. And feel free to spend an hour talking with the parents. Always do whatever you need to do. And then we can always, if you have questions, we can figure it out how to bill later. All right, I'm going to